Hey parents, one of our biggest jobs as parents is always wanting to protect our kids. I know as a parent that's something I've always wanted to do, protect my kids from the falls, protect my kids from the accidents. But one thing that I don't think we think about is protecting our kids from getting into tax trouble. Throughout this video, I want to give you some tips on how to teach your kids about taxes and protect them from getting themselves into tax trouble. One of the best ways that I know how to teach kids about taxes is to start off in stages when they're really young. So when your kids are really young, for example, when they're in elementary school or maybe even before elementary school, and you're getting ready to give your kid a treat like an ice cream cone or something that they enjoy to eat, I want you to take a big bite out of it, maybe a third of it, and then hand it to your kid. And your kid is going to look at you with this startled look like, why on earth did you take some of my ice cream? And they may even cry. Well, that's going to be your first opportunity to let them know that whatever they work hard for, they don't get to have 100% of it, because our government will require them to pay in the form of taxes. And that visual, that shock of you biting out of their ice cream cone is going to be the first way that you're going to educate them, because a picture is worth 1,000 words. When you decide to have that conversation with your kids, that's when you're going to really begin to explain to your kids what taxes are and how they are utilized. I'd like to start off when kids are in elementary school, because most times we're walking our kids to school or we're giving them a ride in the car. And when I'm walking them to school, I would always talk to my kids about the sidewalks that we're walking down and how there are street signs on the way to school with street lights that we get to press the button so that they can cross the street safely. And typically there's a crossing guard waiting to hold up the sign to stop the traffic so our kids can cross the street safely. I like to take the opportunity to explain to my kids that these conveniences that we have, the crossing guard, the sidewalk, the street light, these things do not come free. These things come at a cost. So the money that we withhold from our paychecks actually go towards paying for these conveniences. I want my kids to realize that the sidewalks, the crossing guards, the light, that these things are not free. So I start to ask my kids question, who do you think pays for the crossing guard? Who do you think builds those stop signs? Who do you think operates those stoplights? I start to make them think by asking them basic questions. And then when they start to give me the answers, that is when I let them know that we as citizens pay into the system, the tax system, so that our local governments can make sure that these things are there for our kids to be safe. And it's going to provoke curiosity within your children. But that's going to be the first way that you're going to start to introduce the concept of taxes, but actually connected to something real, connected to something they can actually visualize, connected to something that's tangible for them. And if your kids are attending public school, you might want to also ask them, who pays for these teachers to be in your classroom and teach you? Who pays for the basketball at recess and the jump ropes and all of the slides and the things that you guys get to utilize to have fun? And when your kids start to answer those questions, again, it is your opportunity to introduce the concept of government and taxes, and that nothing is really free. There's a cost for everything, and that mommy and daddy are paying either property taxes, so those things are there, property taxes for the school, and you can start to introduce the concept slowly but surely. Will they completely get it in elementary school? No, they will not, but you would have made the connection to what they are accustomed to utilizing, always being there, the teacher, the school, the principal, the crossing guard, and the cost to have those items. Once your kids get into middle school and they really start to earn an allowance, now you can ramp up the conversation about taxes. Why? Because when kids earn an allowance, they can begin to go out and purchase things for themselves. This is a great opportunity to allow your kids to go out to the store, go out to the mall, or wherever you shop. Let them take their money and let them go up to the cash register and pay for something. So when they go up to the cash register to pay for that ice cream, to pay for that shirt, whatever it is that they want, and say, for example, that shirt may cost them $10. But when they get up to the cash register, instead of it being $10, the total is going to be $10.75 or $11.75, depending on the tax rate where you live. And your kid is going to turn to you and go, why is it costing $11 or $10.75 when the price tag said it was only $10? This is going to be your opportunity to once again introduce your kids to the concept of taxes. And at this point, you're going to be talking about sales tax, but it's going to make that concept of having to pay extra really come home for your kids, because then they're going to realize, wow, things really do cost money. I really do have to pay extra for things. And it really nails down that concept, and it makes them more conscious about dollars. So when your kids get that allowance and they go out and they have to spend money for themselves, it really locks in that learning when it comes to taxes, because there's so many different taxes that you as parents are going to have to introduce your kids to. You want to use every opportunity you can to educate your kids about income taxes and sales taxes and property taxes. And when they go spend their own money, that's a great way for them to lock in the learning about sales taxes. By the time your kids are now getting into high school, they're starting to think about those part-time jobs because they want to start to do everything, right? They want to start to go out with their friends. They want to start to go to the proms and all those dances. And they really become aware of money, especially in high school. This is typically the time that your kids are going to get a part-time job. And guess what? When they get a part-time job, they have to fill out the appropriate paperwork. My kids, when they got their first part-time job, they brought that paperwork home to me. And what I did was turn around and push that paperwork right back to them. You're going to learn how to fill out your own paperwork for that part-time job. And that required them to fill out a W-4 form. And they would say to me, Mom, what does this mean? And I would turn around and say to them, I want you to read it, understand it for yourself. And once they did, I would then explain to them what it meant to fill out a W-4 form, because that meant that they were going to withhold from your paycheck some tax. And that tax was going to be Social Security and Medicare. And even then, they didn't quite understand it. But when they received their first paycheck, and their first paycheck was supposed to be $100, but they actually only brought home $87 for their first paycheck, they were like, oh my gosh, my check is not what it was supposed to be. They took my money. And I would say to them, they took your money or you paid into the tax system. They're like, what do you mean I paid into the tax system? That was my opportunity to explain to my kids about tax withholding, federal and state income tax withholding, and also my opportunity to explain to my kid about Social Security and Medicare tax withholding. And this became a very important lesson for them, because we need our kids to understand that we operate on a pay-as-you-go system. And we want to be disciplined about that. And what I mean by pay-as-you-go, I mean as you earn your income, you pay your taxes as you go. And it teaches our kids discipline about paying their taxes. And this is something really, really important, is to teach our kids discipline about their income taxes. It's also equally important to teach the kids about Social Security and Medicare tax. And they're going to be really confused, but they need to understand that probably their grandma and their grandpa may be living off of Social Security, and that grandma and grandpa may be using Medicare to go to the doctor every time they go. Again, you got to connect the concept to something that's real for your kids. And if your kids have elderly family members like grandparents or aunts and uncles, this is the time to connect it to something that they can understand. Grandma and grandpa are able to stay home now and not work because they may be receiving a Social Security or Medicare check. Very important to link those concepts. So as my kids earned their money from their first part-time job, and as they withheld tax out of that job, it was important for them to understand that at the end of the year, they were going to receive their very first tax form, a W-2 form. And when they did receive it in January, one of the things that I wanted to make sure they understood was all the income that you earned that year accounted for on that W-2. Again, this was confusing for them, but I told them, keep every single pay stub. And you learn math in second grade. I want you to add up every single pay stub. And at the end of the year, was those earnings, the total was showed up on that W-2. And they were able to affirm that it did. Again, teaching them about pay stubs, teaching them how pay stubs aggregate and add up to a W-2 at the end of the year. The secondary concept, now it is the end of the year. And I want to make sure that my kids understand that when you get that W-2 in the mail, it's not just mail, it's an actual IRS form. It's called a W-2 form. And when you get a W-2 form, our government expects us to actually file an income tax return. This is another concept that I needed to teach my kids. Don't just get those forms in the mail and toss them and forget them. You actually have to take an action. You actually have to file an income tax return. And they're like, Mom, I thought that's what you did. Oh, I do, but you are now a taxpayer. You earned income. That made you a taxpayer. You paid taxes into the system. That now requires you to report your W-2 form to the Revenue Department of your state and IRS every single year. And it's important to teach your kids that they want to make sure they do this on time, every single time. And on time is filing by April 15th. And the reason why I want you to teach your kids this, because a lot of people are entrepreneurs and they get themselves into a tax slinky because a lot of people didn't work W-2 jobs before they became self-employed, especially the millennial groups. They are shying away becoming W-2 employees and they're going into business. And no one is there to teach them the concept of tax withholding, the concept of tax compliance, and the concept of you earn money and you're gonna owe a ton at the end of the year if you're not disciplined about paying your taxes. So parents, I wanna make sure that you educate your kids on what taxes are. Start by taking a big bite out of that ice cream, or drink half of their shake, or a third of their soda, whatever it is that you need to do to make sure it's real for your kids, and etch that picture in their mind so they will never forget about the concept of taxes. And while you're educating your kids, make sure they also understand it's not just income taxes, it's payroll taxes, it's property taxes, it's sales taxes. There's a lot of taxes, but making sure they get that concept is so important. And because we are our kids' first teacher, our kids' best teacher, it is best that it comes from us so that they don't get into a tax slinky in the beginning. If you enjoyed this video, I want you to like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you on the next video.